so hello and welcome back to Books and Things, and welcome to the 9th day of 2 weeks of Thomas Hardy. Today I'm going to be talking about The Hand of Ethel Berta. Chapter 1. Young Mrs. Petherwin stepped from the door of an old and well-appointed inn in a Wessex town to take a country walk. By her look and carriage she appeared to belong to that gentle order of society which has no worldly sorrow except when its jewellery gets stolen. But, as a fact not generally known, her claim to distinction was rather one of brains than blood. So The Hand of Ethel Berta was published in 1876, and it is my 6th favourite Hardy novel. I'm very fond of this one, and I think it is incredibly underrated. I think it is such a brilliant, brilliant book, and it's such a shame that it's so rarely heard of. Like, until I started the reading project to read all of Thomas Hardy's novels with Anne from Beyond the Pages, Yamini from The Sceptical Reader, and Alicia from Ex Libris, I had never heard of this book. I think The Hand of Ethel Berta is possibly Hardy's least well-known novel, but it is brilliant. It's so good. So before I go on to talk about all the things I love about this book, I want to quickly explain the plot and the premise. It follows the character of Ethel Berta Petherwin. Now, she has had quite an interesting life. Her parents are servants and she was born to a very, very lower class life, but she sort of raised herself, worked hard in school, became a governess, and then while a governess she met and fell in love with a man of a much higher station. She married him, but then 2 weeks after their marriage he very sadly died, but she gets sort of taken in by her mother-in-law and raised to be a lady. So now that she has become this very upper-class lady, she is at great pains to make sure that nobody in her life knows that her parents are servants, that her brothers are workmen. She is very, very careful to make sure that all of society thinks that she has this very, very upper-class background, as she pretends to have. She attracts a lot of suitors. There are 4 men who all vie for her affections. One of them, Mr. Julian, who is the one we sort of follow most closely ourselves, she is known for quite a long time, and they actually met fairly on in life just before she married her late husband. He was in love with her then. She kind of slightly returned his feelings and then kind of left him to marry this other man. He didn't really understand why, but they meet again by chance fairly near the beginning of the book. And there are 3 other men, all of whom are very, very wealthy, who all kind of vie for the hand of Ethel Berta, who are all trying to marry her. The book is partly about Ethel Berta's kind of romantic relationships. It's also about Ethel Berta's career as a writer. She is a poet and also a novelist, but rather than writing and publishing her novels, she writes them and then reads them aloud to companies. And the book is partly also about her relationship with her family. Her father is a butler in the household of like upper class society family who she actually like goes to dinner with and knows, but of course they don't know that she's actually the daughter of their butler. There's also her sister Picoti, and the relationship she has with her sister is very important. Likewise the relationship with her brothers who are workmen. It's a very, very interesting setup, and the plot is insanely dramatic. Like, for a book that's about 400 pages, so much happens. It's considered one of Thomas Hardy's novels of ingenuity. So there are 3 of these: The Hand of Ethel Berta, Elisodian, and Desperate Remedies. These 3 novels are the most sort of plot driven of Hardy's novels and are really kind of dramatic, full of like mystery and intrigue. And obviously at the heart of Ethel Berta is Ethel Berta's secret, and the fact that she is always trying to pretend to society that her background was not what it was. So, things I love about this book. There are a lot. One is that it's a really unique and unusual Hardy. I don't think it has like the epic brilliance of some other Hardy novels. I don't think it's as tragically beautiful or as perfect, but it's really different, it's really unique, it's really interesting. A lot of it is set in London, which is quite interesting. Also the fact that her parents are servants is very interesting. Thomas Hardy's novels in general deal with a lot of working class characters, but for the most part they are rural labourers, or they're working in trade in rural areas. He's dealing with working class characters who don't encounter very often people from the upper classes, whereas in this book he's dealing with the gulf between servants and the upper classes, and dealing very often with the way that the upper classes treat servants, which is really, really interesting. And there's this brilliant, fascinating, really interesting bit in the book where Ethel Berta is living in London and she brings all her family to live with her because she wants them to have a good life and a good quality of life. At the same time, she doesn't want anyone to know that they're her family, so she pretends that they're her servants. Except she sort of pretends that they're her servants, but they also sort of are her servants, so effectively all her siblings are her servants. It's weird. It's really fascinating though, because it really examines class in a really complicated way, and also examines her very odd class position and the mix of shame she feels about her family and where she came from, but also the great desire she has to help them and to do as well for them as she can. But also she finds it very hard to talk to some of them. She has a good relationship with her sister Picoti, who is as clever and as educated as her, but some of her other sisters who have no interest in education like Ethel Berta and have no interest in books and have a very, very different life to her and a very, very different mental life as well, she finds really hard to talk to. And the way that Hardy looks at her relationship with her family, the fact that she feels out of place within her own family but also out of place within upper class society, is fascinating. It's so, so good. I also love Ethel Berta's role as a writer. I think it's brilliant. I mentioned last week when I spoke about A Pair of Blue Eyes that in A Pair of Blue Eyes the main character is a writer and nothing is made of it, and it made me really sad. But in this book, in The Hand of Ethel Berta, she is a writer and we get to find out so much about her writing career. The book begins with her publishing a volume of poetry, and there's a chapter fairly near the beginning which is basically just society gentlemen sat around discussing her poetry, which I really, really love. It's really interesting to hear so much more about it. I also love this device of her dramatic readings because it's such an interesting and different thing, this idea that she writes novels but she won't publish them, she has to read them aloud to tell the story, and the fact that the beauty of her writing is connected both with the fact that she's a good writer but also with the fact that she's a compelling person. I also really like the fact that in many ways it's this talent for writing that makes so many men fall in love with her. It's also very important to note that although she is kind of in the upper classes now, and although she is looked after for some of the book by her mother-in-law, she also kind of wants to own her own money. She wants to earn something. I also love the theme of music in this. One of her suitors, the one we sort of hear most about, is Mr. Julian, who is a musician. He used to be a gentleman, but his father lost all his money, and now he supports himself and his sister by playing music professionally, and I really like the way the book deals with that and how it looks at his art, and in comparison to Ethel Berta's, I think it's really, really brilliant. And then there are so many characters in this book I love. Like I already said, Ethel Berta is a fascinating character. She is so complicated. I also love Picotti, I love Mr. Julian, other men who are interested in her, Mr. Ladywell and Mr. Ney. They are so well developed, and their characterization, their relationship as friends is so well done as well. I also just love the way this book looks at the theme of marriage and why it would be right to marry someone. Ethel Berta is in this kind of muddled dilemma throughout the book because she was married before, but her husband has been dead quite a long time now, and she knows that she could get married again. And her internal conflict is, should she marry someone who she likes, like Mr. Julian, or should she marry someone like Mr. Ney, who could support her and her family? And also, if she were to marry, would she have a responsibility to tell that person where she came from and what her family is? And could she tell them that after marriage? Would that be wrong, or should she tell them before, but would they then not want to marry her? The book very interestingly explores what might be a moral or immoral reason to marry someone, and I think that is really, really interesting and very, very well done. It's a really fascinating exploration of the morality of marriage and the morality of marriage and money, and it's just great. It's so good. It's a really, really fascinating book with so many interesting themes. In terms of stuff I like about the book less, there isn't that much. The only thing I would say that slightly lets the book down for me is the ending. It's not terrible. As I have mentioned before this week, there are some weird Hardy endings. This isn't one of the Hardy endings that I think is wrong. I'm just not completely satisfied. I don't think I'm supposed to be. I think it's kind of okay. And I think it is one of those Hardy novels where there are things that are sort of happy and sort of sad, and then there are things that are sad but sort of okay and you can kind of make your peace with. I don't know. I don't 100% love the ending, but I also kind of feel that it was the right one, if that makes sense. Regardless, I think The Hand of Ethel Berta is a brilliant, brilliant, exciting book. It might not be for everyone. I know the other booktubers I buddy read it with didn't love it quite as much as me, but I think it is a brilliant, exciting, wonderful, fascinating book. Quite a different Hardy novel, so not one to start with, I would say, because I think it would give you the wrong impression of what the rest of his books would be, but it is so thoroughly enjoyable, so worth a read, and so underrated. Like, why haven't more people read this book? Please let me know down in the comments if you happen to have actually read The Hand of Ethel Berta, or if you would like to in the future. I hope you have enjoyed this video, and I'll be back tomorrow to talk about my 5th favourite Thomas Hardy novel.